I woke up before my alarm went off, with that familiar weight in the pit of my stomach that appears when you want everything to go right, but fear something might go wrong. It was Saturday, a few hours before the baby shower, and already from my bed I could smell the vanilla frosting left in the kitchen from the night before. I sat up slowly because Aurora was moving and the skin on my abdomen was pulling. The same thing had happened to me during the early morning, and I had to take a deep breath to keep from panicking. I walked to the room we'd set up for her. Cream walls, a moon-shaped paper lantern, the wooden mobile Mark hung 2 weeks ago, and the dresser stacked with diaper packs like a small wall. I checked the list taped to the closet. Ice, plates, glasses, knives, candles, music, printed photos. I turned on the kettle, poured myself unsweetened tea on the obstetrician's recommendation, and told myself that today had to be simple. Smile, be thankful, don't overthink, and save my strength. By 9, I was already on the move, my bathrobe stained with flour and my hair tied awkwardly, but with a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in months. I placed the souvenirs on the living room table, small bags of cookies and a pale pink ribbon that took me hours to tie because my fingers swell in the heat. Mark came up behind me, gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, said, "I'll be back in 20, I'll get some ice and sodas," and left, keys jingling. I didn't pause to measure his tone. I was busy gauging distances. Chairs by the window, a drinks table to the right, trays of savory closer to the stove, the cake in the center, the ultrasound photos in a simple frame. I thought the time had finally come to celebrate without fear after the negatives, the 2 miscarriages, and the awkward questions. I touched my bump and told him softly that this day was for us, that we were going to be okay, that I would take care of everything. I took a deep breath, opened the curtains, and let some air in. The house smelled freshly cleaned and nervous. The guests began to arrive shortly after noon. First, 2 co-workers holding balloons and smiling made me feel for a moment that everything was in order. Then my mother arrived with a tray of empanadas, and that "I was always here" air that silently irritated me so much. My father behind her was carrying a case of wine, even though I had repeatedly reiterated that I didn't want alcohol at the event. I simply thanked them and continued seating, because that was the role I knew. The dutiful daughter, the one who accepts everything with a tense smile. An hour later, the room was filled with mingled voices, plates balanced on napkins, and children running between the adults' legs. I took refuge in the kitchen for a few minutes, staring out the window at the sun filtering into the yard. I needed to convince myself that nothing could ruin this day. That's when Lena, my younger sister, appeared. I heard her before I saw her. Her loud laugh, the jingling of her bracelets, the exaggerated surprise. She always used to announce her entrance. She was wearing a tight dress, one of those that seemed chosen more to provoke than to accompany. Her heels clicked on the floor as if she were marching in the streets rather than entering a family gathering. She leaned forward to hug me, too close, too long, and whispered something like, "You look so pretty," in an ambiguous tone that chilled my spine. I tried to downplay it and led her toward the group, where she immediately commanded attention. I saw her talking to Mark, casually touching his arm, and laughing with that complicity I'd always noticed, but that everyone insisted on calling my imagination. I swallowed and went back to arranging plates, vowing that I wouldn't let anything rob me of my calm. The afternoon progressed amid typical baby shower games, posed photos with balloons, and the aunt's comments about who the baby girl would look like. I responded with automatic smiles, thanking each gift, arranging the wrappings in a large bag, and repeating "thank you, really," until my throat went dry. From the corner, I could see Lena, always surrounded by people, telling anecdotes that had little to do with the event. Mark occasionally approached to ask if I needed anything, but his eyes inevitably strayed toward her. It wasn't the first time it had happened, but I forced myself to look away so as not to lose control. The music played softly, and on the surface, everything seemed like a normal celebration, but inside me, something was building like a contained storm. When someone proposed a toast, I thought it would be my mother or a close friend who would speak. But it was Lena who raised her glass, smiling as if she were about to star in a movie scene. Her voice filled the room with phrases about the importance of family, about how happy she was to be with me at that moment, and suddenly, without hesitation, she uttered those words that still echo in my head today. My true soulmate has always been Mark. The air suddenly fell. Some laughed uncomfortably, thinking it was a joke. Others looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I felt the glass slip through my fingers, the floor tremble beneath my feet, and my entire embarrassment compress into a single point of fear and rage. The silence that followed was more brutal than the words themselves. My mother forced a brief laugh, as if wanting to ease the tension, and muttered something about what a joker Lena was. My father avoided looking at me, looking down at his drink. Mark took a sip, feigning indifference, as if those words hadn't affected him at all. I stood still, my throat dry, feeling every glance in the room bore into my skin. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Inside me, a voice screamed that that sentence hadn't been a mistake or a joke. It was a disguised confession, an involuntary glimpse into what had been brewing behind my back for years. In a matter of seconds, all those situations that had made me uncomfortable and that I had always downplayed came flooding back to me. Lena's overly long hugs at family gatherings, the double entendre jokes at dinner parties, the excessive and inappropriate gifts, the ambiguous comments at my own wedding. I also remembered every time I tried to talk about it and was told I was too sensitive, that I shouldn't exaggerate, that my sister was just being spontaneous and affectionate. I had gotten used to swallowing those doubts so as not to be the one causing the problem. But that night, in the midst of a celebration that should have been one of hope, I understood that all that silence had been a mistake. I forced myself to remain seated, with a calm I didn't feel, while my heart pounded so hard it seemed to want to burst from my chest. I watched Lena take a sip from her glass, as if nothing had happened, basking in the attention she'd received. I watched Mark remain motionless, without even denying her, with that coldness that had so often made me doubt myself. In that instant, I knew that what I had suspected for years was right before my eyes. It wasn't my imagination, it wasn't unjustified jealousy, it wasn't an exaggeration. It was the truth, naked and cruel, on the table at my own baby shower. And if you've read this far, tell me in the comments where you're following me from. Because I know I'm not the only one who, at a family gathering, felt everything suddenly fall apart. That statement from my sister not only robbed me of the peace of the moment, but also opened the door to all the memories and signs I had ignored. It was the breaking point. I understood that the trust I thought I had in my husband and my own family had died that day, in front of everyone, with a single raised glass and words impossible to forget. That night, when the house fell silent and only the remains of plates and deflating balloons remained, I sat on the couch, my mind reeling. Mark acted as if nothing had happened, took off his jacket, asked me if I was tired, and went straight to bed. I didn't reply. I barely nodded, while rage and uncertainty burned inside me. I couldn't sleep with that phrase repeating in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lena raising her glass, smiling as if she'd scored a goal in front of everyone. It was impossible to rest with that image. That's when I saw it. Mark's tablet on the dining room table, turned on and unlocked. I approached it with a lump in my throat and took it with trembling hands. At first I hesitated, feeling that mixture of fear and guilt that comes when you're about to confirm something you don't want to know. but the impulse was stronger. I opened the conversations, and there it was. Hundreds of messages between him and Lena, accumulated over years. They weren't trivial or innocent. They were confessions, cruel comparisons toward me, hints of a future together. Words that made it clear they shared an emotional intimacy I'd never had with him. I continued reading for hours, unable to put down the device even though each sentence was a direct blow to the chest. I saw him tell her that with her he felt free, how she responded that she had never loved anyone like that, how they both shared secrets that should have belonged to me. I found no evidence of physical encounters, but the emotional one was enough to destroy me. It was a full-blown betrayal disguised as confidences. I cried silently, covering my mouth with my hands so as not to wake Mark, feeling like everything I had built had collapsed in a matter of minutes. When I finally put the tablet back on the table, I was done with the tears. What emerged was a strange, different calm, as if I had found clarity within the disaster. I realized that yelling, fighting, or begging wouldn't help. They had already taken so much from me. What I needed was strategy, not drama. I decided to consult a lawyer, organize my accounts, legally protect my daughter, and prepare an exit plan. If they had been manipulating me for years, this time I would be the one silently moving the pieces. I wasn't going to allow them another victory. The next day, I made an appointment with a divorce lawyer recommended by a work acquaintance. I arrived at her office feeling like I was entering uncharted territory, my heart heavy but determined not to back down. I told her everything, the losses, the pregnancy, the toast scene, the texts. She listened silently, taking notes. And in the end, she told me I wasn't crazy, that the evidence was enough to prove an emotional betrayal and protect my future. She explained to me step by step what I should do: gather evidence, secure accounts, plan custody. It was the first time in a long time I felt someone believed me without judgment. From that moment on, every day became part of a calculated plan. I checked my bank accounts, moved money to a separate account, compiled copies of messages, and saved everything in a password-protected folder. I started therapy to sustain myself emotionally, and despite the fatigue of pregnancy, I kept a detailed log of everything I needed to do to stay on track. Mark continued to act as if everything was fine. Kisses on my forehead, perfunctory questions about how I was feeling, routine gestures that had once reassured me but now felt theatrical. I let him believe it because my silence was my weapon. Every fake smile was another brick in the wall I was building to protect myself. I chose to have it all happen at a seemingly innocent family dinner, weeks after the baby shower. I calmly organized the invitations, feigning enthusiasm, as if I wanted to restore the atmosphere after that awkward toast. No one suspected a thing. Lena accepted immediately, promising to bring wine. My mother offered desserts. My father confirmed with a curt, "I'll be there," and Mark seemed satisfied because he thought we were getting back to normal. While they believed it was an attempt at bonding, I had already prepared a folder with printed copies of the most compromising messages. That night would be the final straw. The house was spotless, the table set with care, the plates arranged like any other family gathering. I moved calmly, observing every gesture, Lena talking too much, seeking attention, my parents applauding her comments, Mark sitting next to her, laughing in a tone I found unbearable. The script was the same as always, but this time I had the last word. When dessert was served, and silence fell for a few seconds, I took the opportunity to take out the folder. I didn't raise my voice or shed tears. I began to read, one by one, the fragments of conversations they themselves had written. The first message I read left an awkward silence. The second made my mother stop smiling and Lena squirm in her seat, trying to interrupt me with a, "It's not what it seems." I didn't let her speak. I kept reading. Sentences where Mark confessed to feeling trapped with me, where he told Lena that she made him feel alive, where they dreamed of a future together. Every word they had once shared in secret now echoed on the table like a sharp thud. Mark tried to take the papers from my hands, stammering that they were just joking, that nothing physical had ever happened. I looked at him calmly, because I no longer needed to shout. The evidence spoke for itself. Lena started crying, accusing me of overreacting, of taking what were considered trust games out of context. My mother begged me to stop embarrassing the family like this, while my father stared down at his plate, unable to defend me even once. Mark, his face pale, insisted that he loved me, that everything could be fixed if I just put those papers aside. I took a deep breath and responded with the only things I needed to say, that I had already started the divorce process, that he had to leave the house, that Lena would never come near me or my daughter again, and that my parents had lost the right to call each other grandparents. The atmosphere turned chaotic in a matter of seconds. Mark stood up abruptly, his voice cracking between pleading and anger, assuring me that I couldn't kick him out like that everything was being misinterpreted. Lena wept profusely, accusing me of destroying the family out of jealousy and pride. My mother approached me with tears in her eyes, trying to hold my hand, repeating that I should think about the baby girl on the way. But I was no longer the woman who had remained silent. I felt a different strength within me, a determination I had lacked for years, and I wasn't willing to let that moment slip away. In a firm voice, I gave them the ultimatum. They had to leave my house right now. I wasn't going to allow any more explanations, no belated apologies, no worthless promises. For the first time, I saw on their faces the bewilderment of losing the control they'd always had over me. Lena screamed that I would regret it. My mother wept inconsolably, and Mark tried to touch my shoulder as a last resort. I stood up, opened the door, and pointed at them. One by one they left, sobbing and scolding, and when the door closed behind them, I felt the silence of the house weigh on me, but at the same time, it freed me. The next day I confirmed every detail of the process with my lawyer. We filed the divorce petition with the printed evidence and organized the strategy so there was no room for maneuver. Mark tried to resist the first few days, sending long messages where he asked to talk, promised to change, or swore he'd never gotten physical. I didn't respond to any of them. It was clear to me that every word he said was a trap disguised as regret. The lawyer was with me every step of the way, reminding me to remain firm and that the priority was Aurora's custody. It was a quick process because he understood he couldn't win. Once the divorce was final, I packed up my essentials and moved to another city. I didn't want to see the streets that held memories of Lena and Mark's complicity anymore, nor did I want to run into my parents, who still insisted I should get over what happened for everyone's sake. I closed the door on that chapter without looking back. The new house was smaller, with bare walls and simple furniture, but the feeling of freedom it gave me was enormous. For the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling like someone was judging my every move. That move was the first step toward a different life. The day Aurora was born, I felt like all the pain had had a purpose. The birth was long and exhausting, with moments when I thought I wouldn't make it. But when I heard her cry for the first time, I knew my new life was beginning. I hugged her with a mixture of tears and smiles, feeling that in my arms I held not only my daughter, but also the proof that I had survived it all. The betrayals and humiliations no longer mattered, because in that moment I understood that my strength must be focused on protecting her and giving her a home where she would never feel unappreciated. The first night at home with her was chaotic and beautiful at the same time. The crying, the diapers, the lack of sleep, all of it reminded me that I was effectively alone, but at the same time I had never felt more accompanied. I walked around the living room with Aurora in my arms, stroking her forehead and repeating that I wouldn't allow her to grow up amid manipulation and favoritism, as I had experienced. That vow was my driving force. Every sleepless night became a silent promise to build a different life, even if it took all the effort in the world. As the weeks passed, I realized I needed to surround myself with people who understood my situation without judging me. I started attending a support group for single mothers, something I struggled with at first because I didn't want to feel labeled as the abandoned one or the cheated on one. But at each meeting, I met women who carried similar scars to mine. Some betrayed, others worn down by toxic marriages, all with the same goal of moving forward for themselves and their children. I felt heard for the first time in a long time, and that gave me unexpected strength. From those gatherings, friendships were born that soon became my new family. We shared practical advice, took turns babysitting, and celebrated small achievements as if they were collective victories. One of them helped me get a part-time job. Working from home, another taught me how to better organize my accounts, and together we laughed in moments when I would have previously cried alone. It was in that circle that I learned that I wasn't doomed to carry the weight of betrayal forever. I could transform it into momentum. And Aurora, growing up among these strong women, absorbed each gesture of resilience as a natural part of her life. Over time, that support network inspired me to take a bigger step. I realized that it wasn't enough to heal my personal wound. I wanted my experience to help other women feel less alone. Thus was born the idea of founding a small consulting project to support women going through a separation. At first, I worked from my own dining room, with a table full of papers and Aurora's crib at my side, answering messages and listening to stories that felt painfully familiar. Each conversation was like a mirror of what I had experienced, but this time I was on the other side, offering support instead of seeking it. The project grew faster than I imagined. What began as informal conversations transformed into a space where many women found legal guidance, practical advice, and above all, the security of being heard without being belittled. I received messages of gratitude that reminded me why I had decided to start from scratch. Sometimes I stayed up until dawn, responding with Aurora asleep on my chest, convinced that I was building something bigger than a simple personal revenge. I was building a refuge for those who had been treated like me, with contempt and gaslighting. This mission gave me back the energy I thought I'd lost forever. Aurora grew up in that different environment, surrounded by women who treated her with sincere affection and without favoritism. From a young age, she learned that family isn't always defined by blood, but by those who are truly present. I spoke to her simply, telling her we were a team and that the two of us were enough. As she learned to walk, talk, and explore the world, I silently told myself that I would never allow her to live under the shadow that had cast a shadow over me. Her smile every morning was confirmation that I had made the right decision to cut ties with those who had never known how to care for me. I sometimes received attempts at contact from my parents, even letters asking to see their granddaughter, but I never gave in. I didn't want Aurora to grow up hearing the same justifications that destroyed me. That I should be understanding, that I was exaggerating, that it had all been a misunderstanding. No. She deserved an environment free of those lies. My life revolved around her well-being and showing her that one can live with dignity even after the most painful betrayal. And her every step, every drawing, every new word became a reminder that she hadn't just survived, she was building something better. The following years taught me that time doesn't erase scars, but it does allow us to transform them. into reminders of strength. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come and looking for answers from people incapable of giving me the truth. My routine was filled with work, with laughter shared with Aurora, with projects that kept me going. There were nights of extreme tiredness, days when loneliness weighed more than I wanted to admit. But even so, I never regretted closing that door. Every effort made sense when I saw my daughter grow up confidently, free from favoritism, learning that respect is not negotiable. If you've made it this far with my story, I'd love for you to share it so others can also find the strength to cut loose from what hurts them. It wasn't easy to let go of my husband, my sister, or my own parents, but I understood that family isn't someone who shares your blood, but someone who respects your boundaries. Aurora is living proof that you can start from scratch, that an act of betrayal can become the spark of a new life. Today, I walk with my head held high, convinced that the silence once imposed on me has been broken forever. I'm sometimes asked if I think about what happened, if I ever regret not having forgiven. The truth is, I don't. I don't miss Mark or Lena or my parents in their role as grandparents. For a while I missed the idea of a close-knit family, but I realized that idea never really existed. It was a disguise I kept up to avoid accepting the obvious. The day of Lena's toast finally shattered that illusion, and although it hurt, it also freed me. Today I look forward, holding Aurora's hand and knowing that I survived something many prefer to keep quiet. I don't need revenge or recognition, because my greatest triumph was proving to myself that I could break away from toxicity and build a dignified future. If my story reaches someone experiencing something similar, I just want them to know that they are not alone, that there is always a way out, and that sometimes the greatest act of self-love is to close the door and never open it again.